right, so I'm Yoshi. I'm in private practice. I mainly work with trauma and couples in the queer community. I do supervise students and other psychotherapists. I started doing it in the past few years, especially when the pandemic started. I also founded the Ottawa Counseling and Psychotherapy Center, which is basically a group of practitioners in private practice just all over Ontario right now. And so it's a resource if you're looking for a therapist. Our learning objectives for today are to create an awareness of sensations in the body, to learn about bottom-up approaches, to understand boundaries from a somatic perspective, to understand burnout from a somatic perspective, and to gain some tools to self-regulate and create awareness of how your everyday life affects you. In our agenda, we're going to explore different approaches to gaining access to our nervous system. So somatic experiencing, inner relationship focusing, and internal family systems, which are the main three therapeutic techniques that I use. We're going to talk about the window of tolerance, burnout, and throughout this whole process, we're going to interweave some practical exercises and tools. So before we get started, I'm curious as to why you're here today. What would you like to learn today? Is there one question you would like answered? And for now, I'd like you guys to write it down and let me know at the end of our time together. And if it's also within the scope of the presentation, if it still needs answering. So just for now, I'd like you guys to hold this curiosity of why are you here today? What are you looking to learn? So if you've gone to therapy before, you might have noticed that many therapies over the years have focused on changing how we think, on creating coping mechanisms and tools to manage life stressors. So I imagine many of you who have reached out for help have received help in the form of, how can we look at things from a different perspective? These tools are very useful in the short term, and they eventually stop working because there's only so much we can think our way out of an emotion. So because of that, I started looking at other modalities. And in my search, I came across what's called bottom-up approaches. I learned that most of the techniques that we are taught are top-down approaches, meaning that we work with the mind to change the effects of the body. Bottom-up approaches work with the trauma stored in the body and work their way up to changing how we view the world. So today, one of my goals is to introduce you to some of these techniques for you to have a taste of what they feel like. So the top-down approaches are cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, and solution focus. There's many more, but those are the main ones that when you're working with doctors, they'll be like, go to CBT, go to DBT. And the bottom-up approaches, SEIRF and IFS, are not as well known. They're starting to take more of a hold of in the psychotherapy community, but they're still far from being what the doctor prescribes. The first one I came across is called Somatic Experiencing. It is created by Peter Levine, and these are some of the books that he has written that would give you just an overall idea of what it does. So somatic experiencing is a therapeutic technique to help release trauma from the body. It utilizes principles from observing animals in the wild who on a regular basis are threatened, and yet they're rarely traumatized. By understanding how animals release trauma from their bodies and how as humans we have the same capacities, somatic experiencing has helped us understand and normalize how trauma symptoms are stored. As humans, we let our brains override our natural capacity to heal, which leads us to storing trauma in the body, which ends up creating a constellation of symptoms, including pain, anxiety, and a whole bunch of other things, including a sense of intrusion. Through awareness and paying close awareness to your body sensations, we're able to access the healing action patterns stored in our bodies, and it helps to help the central nervous system just discharge the energy stored and complete defensive strategies that were previously thwarted. Okay, I'm not there yet. So an example of what is meant by paying attention to your body. So as many of you have probably done mindfulness practices and are probably wondering how it's different, I'm going to invite you right now to pay attention to the sensations in the moment and to pay attention to the sensations in your body. So we're going to do a little body inventory, and I'm going to invite you guys to focus inward. And we're going to start with our feet. So find a comfortable spot. If you're sitting at a desk or standing or moving around, just find something that's comfortable where you might be able to close your eyes. And let's start with our feet. So noticing the sensations in your feet, noticing the skin, the floor, the socks, or any other piece of clothing. And just notice what that feels like. Then move up to your ankles, feeling into your muscles, the bones, up your legs, your calves, and feeling into your knees. And noticing any sensations that might be in your knees. Then go up your thighs, feeling into the muscles, the bones, the skin, the contact your skin is having. Feeling your sit bones, your stomach area, your spinal column, your lungs. Notice how you're breathing. And then feeling into your shoulders, your arms, all the way down to your elbows and your forearms. Feel your wrists, movement that your wrists can make. Feeling the bones, muscles, skin, fascia, if you're aware of that. And then feeling all your little fingers and all the little bones in the fingers. And then back to the bottom of your neck, feeling your spinal column just all the way up and down from your tailbone all the way up to the base of your skull. Feel your head, the muscles in your face. Just notice any tension that might be there, so it could be lightness, any vibrations, pain, flow. So we're going to call this baseline 0. And now that you've paid attention to the sensations in your body, I'm going to invite you to focus on something that caught your attention. So that could be your breath, a tightness in your chest, a pain in your back. Many people often carry a tightness in the chest, like a ball. And see if you found if there's a ball there. There could be a pain that you've been struggling with, like a lower back pain or shoulder pain. And I'm going to invite you to notice that sensation and to just sit with it. Invite it to exist. Invite it to take as much space as it wants to. Notice your reaction towards it. If there's any criticism, see if we can, just for now, not criticize it. We can criticize it later. So once we're done this practice, you can go back to criticizing. Just for now, I'm going to invite you to let it exist and to be curious about it. Notice what happens as you let it sit, as you give it curiosity. Maybe notice the edges of it, if it has edges. If it moves, if it goes from one end to your body to the next, if there's a pain in your body, you pay attention to it and it moves, follow it. Don't criticize that it's moving. Just notice that it's moving and just pay attention to the new sensations, where it goes. And then notice your breath. And notice how it is now compared to how it was before. And as we settle into this, becoming familiar with paying attention to the different sensations, I'm going to invite you to think of a stressor in your life. Think of something that recently has been bugging you, just nagging at the back of your brain, or maybe it's whatever. And notice how your body changes at the thought of that. Notice if there's any, like if it gets tighter, if the pain becomes louder, if whatever was heavy becomes heavier. And see if you can invite that sensation to exist. To just, if there's a heaviness, to just allow it to just weigh on you. If it's a tightness, invite it to get tighter. If it's a contraction of your muscles, allow them to contract even more. And just invite notice any criticism happening, and just see that we can leave that criticism for later. Right now, we're going to invite anything that's happening to happen more. So if it's heavy, allow it to get heavier. If it's tight, allow it to get tighter. If there's tingling, allow it. And then notice your breath. And notice how your breath is now compared to baseline 0. And now as we're becoming familiar with this, I'm going to ask you to go to something that brings you joy. That can be a partner, a friend, a pet, a kid, the snow, the spring, the sun. Something fun that you did recently, a joke someone made that made you laugh. Flirt it with anyone. It's usually fun. Notice how your body responds to that. Notice how your body's different. See if there might be more of a lightness, a flow. And then notice what happened to that tightness or heaviness. See if it's still there. And if it's still there, notice if it's the same as it was before, if it has a different quality to it. And then as you settle into that something that brought you joy, let's go back into a body inventory again. And starting with your feet, just noticing the sensations in your feet. And moving up your legs, your ankles, legs, knees, your sit bones, your stomach area. Notice how they feel now compared to when we started. Feeling your spinal column. Feel your breath, your lungs, your heart. Notice how it is now compared to before. Feeling your shoulders, your arms, your face, your head. Just take a moment to sit with it. And take a moment to enjoy it. And when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to start coming back into the room. And by what I mean coming back into the room is when we go into our bodies, like we're going inside. And so our focus and all our awareness goes in. And sometimes we lose our voice. It's hard to speak. Sometimes it's hard to describe what's happening, and we don't need to describe it. And then coming out is coming back into the engagement of we're going to engage with other people, and now we're going to be putting our awareness outside. So I'm going to invite you to share if you're wanting to share. And if you have any questions, this is also the time. What happened when you allowed yourself to sit with a sensation without criticizing? And what did you notice?
Yoshi, while we're waiting for people to respond in the chat box, I was just going to share that there are a couple of comments already from earlier on when you asked people to reflect on why they're here. So just to share, one of the comments was to diffuse stress as soon as it is first felt. There was another comment to understand myself better and my reactions as I get older, sometimes more difficulty with my work and how it's affecting me. And that was from a home care palliative nurse. So just so we have a couple of those. And we have some new comments coming in now. Yeah. So someone has shared that there was flow. Somebody else noticed tightness that decreased considerably. Someone said it made me curious when I stopped criticizing the sensation.
So for that comment, just I'm going to ask you to remember the word self. So when we get into internal family systems, that curiosity is the self getting in, arriving.
Okay. Yeah, and there's another comment here. I found it difficult to focus and stay still.
That's also extremely hard. This approach is can be very unsettling, because when we pay attention, there's so much happening that we want to get away from it. And many of us spend a lot of time making sure we don't feel our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was reflected in the next comment as well. Somebody said it's not the easiest exercise. And then also a comment, there are some body parts that I think about and I have new feelings on that organ.
Yeah, when I first started applying this, I got a lot of like, huh? What are we doing? Books. Yeah. Thank you. So, go ahead.
Yeah, those are all the comments for now.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the nervous system, because somatic experiencing helps understand how the nervous system works. And right now, what we did was, if I would have been doing this with you, like one-on-one, I would have been more aware of how your body's reacting, and I would have given you more prompts that fit your body more. So somatic experiencing teaches us about the nervous system so that we can learn how to work with it. And I imagine many of you are aware of the nervous system, so you probably know it better than I do. And so there's the autonomic nervous system that has a parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic is our rest and digest, so it's a brake pedal, so it helps us slow down and rest. And the sympathetic nervous system helps us in dangerous situations, so the fight or flight and the gas pedal. SC, so somatic experiencing, works with the autonomic nervous system by observing how it's expressed in the body. There may be a twitch, a small movement of the hand, eyes, or head, or a pain in the chest and a tightness. We explore these micro sensations and listen to what they're telling us. As we get familiar with our nervous system, we can learn to distinguish when we're in fight, flight, freeze, or rest and relaxation. So when we felt the flow, we're closer to rest and relaxation. Whereas when we're feeling the tightness and that's more closer to when we're in fight and flight. So trauma. There's many definitions of trauma. And so for our purposes and to keep it simple, it's when something is too much, too soon, and or too fast for our nervous system. So something is defined traumatic by how our nervous system reacts and not by the event itself. Our reaction to when we lose our teddy bear is very different when we're 3 compared to when we're 20 years old. And a wave, sort of like a wave in the ocean, is traumatic. It's traumatic if I don't know how to swim, and fun if I know how to surf. So whether something is traumatic for us is dependent on our resources at the time of the incident and our resources afterwards, whether we receive support or not. So for example, if we're coming out and we're coming out in a homophobic environment is very different than if I come out in a welcoming family. And so I'm going to have a very different experience of an event. If after it happened, I have to hide what happened or get criticized and punished for it. Or if I live in isolation versus if I get support, receive hugs, praise for having survived. And if I get to talk about it and share it. So an assault, if somebody's been assaulted, is very different experience if I'm being blamed afterwards and I'm being told it's my fault that got assaulted versus if I get support. Or when catastrophic events such as earthquakes, it's very different being in a group versus being an isolated event where I'm the only one who got into a car accident and nobody understands what's happening. Oops. There. And so I also want to talk about the window of tolerance. The window of tolerance is a map that helps us know where we are in our nervous system, and it helps us in as a therapist to pay attention to the different body sensations, and that starts telling us where we're at. And it's useful in identifying how best to proceed and intervene, since what is possible or helpful differs depending on whether we're inside our window of tolerance or outside. So when we are operating within the window of tolerance, and it's also called a resilience zone. So this is where I can do the most work. And there's a relative ease, ebb and flow between our gas pedal and our brakes. So between our fight or flight and our calm. So the up and down, it's like on a regular basis. There's a flow that happens in our lives of like we sleep, we're awake. And we eat, we're hungry. Like there's undulation that happens with our bodies. So within the window of tolerance, a number of things are more accessible. So curiosity, physical health, play, thinking is easier, present moment awareness is easier, attunement and connecting, having empathy towards others, and there's more of a sense of stability and wellness. We also have more capacity for self-regulation. So whether that be organically or with grounding strategies. And the top-down methods that we talked about at the beginning are usually more effective if we live within our window of tolerance. So I can change my thinking, and then that's going to change what But if we have had a lot of trauma in our lives, and just of all sorts, we end up with a dysregulated nervous system. And so this is created from chronic stress when we have difficulty managing our state of being. So as a result of chronic stress, adverse condition, and trauma, the nervous system can begin to operate outside of its window of tolerance. The nervous system dysregulation refers to when we have difficulty, organically or voluntarily, modulating our emotional and physiological state, often being caught in or fluctuating between polar extremes. So hyperarousal is acute or chronic states of overactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, where an organism finds itself in survival mode. So when we're going to fight, flight, and freeze. And you can see that in people when everything is an emergency, when you get startled easily, and where you're anxious all the time. And so think of people that you might know who startle easily. They're probably constantly in hyperarousal. Hypoarousal, on the other hand, it's acute or chronic states of overactivation of the parasympathetic nervous system. And so where we find ourselves shut down in response to feeling overwhelmed and unable to mobilize an effective or successful survival response. So that's when we collapse or shut down. These examples of this is when we can't get out of bed, when we're depressed, when we find it really hard to move and everything's fuzzy. When we get sleepy out of the blue and then it goes away after we change the activity we're doing. When we procrastinate, and when we are outside of window of tolerance, when we are outside of our window of tolerance, our capacity to be fully present, connected, and regulated is compromised. So it's harder to think, it's harder to be present. So freeze. Freeze is believed to have aspects of both the autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic. So it's one foot on the gas and one foot on the brakes at the same time. You will find that different versions of the window of tolerance place freeze in either hyperarousal, so given the presence of autonomic activation, so it's a thwarted fight response, while other versions place it in hypoarousal, given the presence of parasympathetic shutdown, staying still to hide from predators. So when we're in freeze, so when there's a bear that comes into my room, I have to get activated to either fight the bear or run away. And that energy that comes up gets activated in my body. But if I'm not able to do either of them because a bear attacked me first, I'm going to end up in freeze. So all that energy that I mobilized to be able to fight and flight gets stored in my body. And then I collapse. So the collapse looks like the hypoarousal, but this hyperarousal from all the fight and flight that happened that I wasn't able to complete. So it's confusing, and it's been taking me a while to fully get my head around it. So there's no universal convention about where freeze should be placed within the window of tolerance, which means that there's different versions of the window of tolerance in existence, which can be very confusing. Any questions so far? Like, is there anything that's popping up there?
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Yoshi. Yeah.
Cool. So the full window of tolerance is a new concept developed by Stephen Terrell and Kathy Kane. And it's when we are chronically outside of our window of tolerance, we tend to develop defensive accommodations or management strategies to provide us with the experience of being within our optimal arousal zone, when in fact we're operating chronically outside of that zone. So in essence, the full window is when we turn to a variety of behaviors in an attempt to approximate regulation. which give the impression that we are in our window of tolerance or that we have a wide window of tolerance when in reality we are not. It is easy to mistake someone who is operating outside of their window in the full window for someone who is within the window of tolerance. For example, it can be easy to miss how we may be dissociating or overriding in order to cope and mistakenly assume that everything is fine. When we have patterns of chronic workaholism or perfectionism, we can be fooled into thinking that we are either very capable or very calm when we're actually at risk of exploding or collapsing. An over-functioning nervous system is easy to miss given how much Western society values productivity and disconnection from inner awareness of nuanced state shift in ourselves and others. So management strategies refer to the various methods we use to cope with internal and external demands. These coping mechanisms serve to approximate regulation as a compensation to situations that feel uncomfortable, unsafe, overwhelming, painful, confusing. And they're not pathological vices or bad habits or due to a lack of willpower. Rather, these behaviors are how we have adapted or adjusted to changing circumstances. So the compelling nature or urgency which these behaviors sometimes occur hint at the dysregulation or disorganized survival energy. So it's often fear and anxiety that are driving them. These also typically reflect presence of early deprivation or lack of co-regulation, safe haven conditions, and a secure base. So strategies that are seen as potentially beneficial can become problematic when the techniques perpetuate a pattern of hyper or hypoarousal, operating outside the true window of tolerance. So for instance, someone who has learned to manipulate their breathing as a management strategy may believe that they're successfully healed from whatever is required, the adoption of that strategy in the first place. But if the breathing strategy is not employed and the feelings and sensations come rushing to the surface, this would be a telltale sign that we're still managing as opposed to recovered. So when things fall apart, if a strategy is not available, or if in preventing one strategy, another one takes its place, so kind of when one addiction replaces another, these are signs that one might be operating in our full window of tolerance. So think about when you've taken workshops and you've had breathing techniques and they work for a little period of time, but all of a sudden they stop working. That's when you know that they just put a little Band-Aid over whatever is actually going on. And just to say, we all have a full window of tolerance. We're all like high achievers, and especially in the type of work that you guys do, you have, like, there's so much demands that you're being given, and you have to put on a nice face, and you have to do so much that you have to compartmentalize and be someone else for those people that you're taking care of. So that's going to be a full window of tolerance. That's a little other persona that you're putting on to be able to cope, that does things differently than when you're at home, and also at home you have no energy. So how is that so different, right? So basically what happens with this full window is that it looks like you're okay, but the resources in your body are that of fight or flight. You're in sympathetic when you're not. And that's why it looks like when we crash, it's like came out of nowhere, because we're not aware of how many resources we're working. Like, how did this person that's so successful and has done all these things all of a sudden on sick leave? How is this person that's the nicest person ever all of a sudden on sick leave? Well, that's because they weren't aware of the resources they were using. And yeah, they were in their full window of tolerance too much and did not come back to work within their window of tolerance.
Yoshi, can I jump in with a couple of questions? Thank you so much for spending some time on that. That's really important, I think, in this conversation. So a couple of comments. One is so true, calm could be dangerous.
Mhm.
Someone else was asking, someone who appears cold or unemotional. So I guess they're
Mhm.
asking if that is someone who may be within their full window of tolerance.
That we cannot assume by what we see necessarily. We need more context. So if I'm cold and unemotional, am I doing that just to you right now because I'm coping with you? Or am I coping with life in general and everything's too much? But then when I go home, I take that down, I go back to within my window of tolerance, and I have enough and I do enough to take care of myself to go back in. So is it something that I'm going in and out and have the balance? Or is it something that when I go home, I'm also still like shutting everything out, and I'm shutting my family out and whoever my support system is. Did that
Okay.
answer the question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I hear what you're saying. I'm sure everyone, like, more context is necessary. It's hard to really understand from one quick snapshot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a couple of other things here. A question about how long someone could last in a full window of tolerance.
That's a really good question. I think it depends on the person. How long can you last without breathing? Average is under a minute, but there's some people that can do 5. So it depends on how practiced you are at living. And I think most of us live within the full window like a long time. We start breaking down at some point when we start aging and we start getting all these pains and symptoms. So chronic pain, for example, fibromyalgia and all that. From what I understand is that that's a bunch of like having lived in the full window and eventually body said that's enough. When we get to parts work, it's the full window's like another part of us that gets created, and that eventually says I've had enough and burns out, and that's it.
Thank you. That's awesome. So in that vein, looking at examples of things, someone was asking about if you could provide an example of what calm could be dangerous means.
Okay. Um, when I am used to, if I'm living in a home environment that is dangerous, so on a regular basis, I have to work very hard at making sure that my family members are calm, that nothing's out of place, that everything's clean, that no one's triggered, and I'm just making sure. So I have learned that on an everyday basis, I have to work and be stressed and be hyper aware of everybody that's happening. And then I enter this new household where no one gets angry and nothing's happening. And I broke a glass and nobody yelled at me. I don't know what to do because you know what? It's coming afterwards. Like that can't be that you're not angry at me because like that thing was out of place or there's dust or something. Like it must come afterwards. So it becomes more dangerous because now I don't know where it's coming from. It's so unfamiliar. I don't know how to sit with this. I'm so used to waiting. So now I don't know what to do. I don't know, like, you mean like I don't have to be looking at what you're doing and trying to figure out where the next blow is going to happen? Ah, it's unsettling.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great description. So there are a couple more. Do we have time for a couple more, Yoki?
Yeah, and actually, well, there's more. I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
Yeah, go
Want
ahead.
me to go first? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people can read them, so.
Perfect. And maybe there'll be more questions coming in as we go through these.
Mhm.
Someone's commented, wow, this just makes so much sense, which is wonderful, right? That it's feeling, it's resonating with people. So here's a question. How do you get out of relying on a faux window of tolerance to function when the life demands require that level of energy from you?
You don't.
Hmm.
All our coping mechanisms are there for a reason. And so our job is to become aware that we're using the coping mechanisms and to decide how much we want to continue to use them. So if I'm playing soccer, I have to decide when I tap out to take a break so somebody can replace me. And so if I sprain my ankle, at what point do I say I keep playing versus I take a break? But if I take a break, there's no one to take my place, so our team loses. Am I okay with that? Or so it's a choice. We end up having to make choices with the budget that we have, with the physical budget we have, the emotional budget that we have. There's a cap, so we have to let go of something.
Yeah.
And if we choose to let go of something, the transition period of being used to doing like this to like this, like that is also, it's unnerving because I don't know what to do with myself. I'm used to moving all the time. Now I can just sit on the beach. Well, this is boring. What am I supposed to, like, I have to do something. So there's a transition period to that, to learn to be okay with nothingness.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Next comment. I've had enough. The straw that breaks the camel's back. Is that hyper or hypo faux window?
Both. So this is two-dimensional, but really I think it's closer to a like you can fold the paper and then they touch each other on the other side, because this is this is an intro. The way that we get taught in class in the somatic experiencing course is that you can have different levels of activation present. So you can have, let's say, out of 100, or like thinking of the car, right? The speed. So gas pedal, I'll go to 100 miles an hour versus the brake puts me at 50. Like, how much pressure am I putting on the brake? How much pressure am I putting on the gas? And so like it depends on what our coping mechanism, like how our body responds and how much of that gets put into with the context. So I wouldn't focus so much as to where we're at in terms of trying to, like, this is exactly where I'm at, because this is a two-dimensional model. There's a lot more to this in terms of three-dimensional model. I would focus more, and I like to simplify it and take a step back. Am I in fight, flight, or am I calm? Is my body feeling the flow and calmness of when I think of a loved one, if I like them and they're not triggering me? Or am I feeling the tightness? If I'm feeling tightness or heaviness or any of that, I'm somewhere in fight, flight. I don't care exactly where I'm at. I just know I'm in the fight, flight somewhere. If I'm in calm, then I'm in calm. So the straw that broke the camel's back is how much am I coping on an everyday basis? Every time you get asked to do a task, is it like, that means I'm coping? Or is it like, oh yeah, sure, I want to do that. Then I'm closer to calm. Did I answer your question?
I think so. I thought it was great.
Can you let me know if it didn't?
Yes, hopefully the person who made the comment will share if they need more information. So a comment here, breathing helps when I'm anxious.
Sorry.
Yeah, and then another one. I place a problem in a cubicle to address later, so it does not interfere with what's happening presently. Then I could deal with the problem at a more relaxed time. Is this wise?
Yes, it's called timeouts. And when we get to IFS, that's letting a part know that you're going to be back to them. And that right now, you know what, you're really important and this issue is really important. But right now I have to focus on this. So I'm going to focus on this and then I will pick you up later. And then internal family systems, that's part of the technique that gets taught. It's like when you get criticism. So like when I was asking you guys to pay attention to the body and there was like this voice like, why are we doing this? Like, oh, that tightness always been there. Like it needs to go. And so I'm like asking that voice, like, hey, can you give me some space? Can you go to another room, go to the little box? Right now, let me focus on this and I'll catch you later. And then afterwards, once we're done paying attention to this, now it's like, all right, now come back criticism. So we pick it back up. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. So one last comment.
Yeah.
I would think that within any given day, we likely cycle from hyper to hypo, depending on the situation and the people involved.
That's correct. So I'm really nervous with public speaking in general, and all my students have been really surprised, which is hilarious. So I have, when setting this presentation, I have gone into hypo a bunch of times, just going like, and then I've brought myself back, and right now I'm more in hyper. And as I've been talking, and there's been times when I've had to read because I'm like, bah! And I'm relying on my notes. When I've had to read, I've gone into hypo, just like my body's about to stop talking to you guys and shut down. I'm like, all right. And then I go back into hyper. So even in this presentation, if you guys have been aware of my body language and the micro movements in my face, I've gone to both.
Thanks so much for that concrete example. That's super helpful. So that's all that's in the chat box for now, Yoshi. We'll let you carry on.
Thank you for the questions. So after somatic experiencing, I ran into inner relationship focusing, and I learned it from one of the faculties from SE. So it was really neat getting the combination of how SE and inner relationship focusing work together. These are a few books that you can pick up if you are interested in. And so the faculty member that explained it to me, that SE is the theory of how the nervous system works, but in a relationship, focusing gives you the words for it. So part of the problem with SE that I found when I was starting to practice is that paying attention to the body sometimes it's just hard and it's not natural. And then it's like, well, what do you notice? And you're like, something, but like, I don't know how to explain, like, so in a relationship focusing has given me a great way to start gaining access to the body when somatic experiencing is too vague. And so focusing is essentially a process of being present with something in our own experiencing. So we're keeping ourselves company, or rather keeping company with something within us in a special way. So it's also my bridge between, IRF is my bridge between SC and IFS and later. So let's just take a moment again to remember a time when you felt really heard, when you felt you had space and safety to explore your inner world. And take some time to sense what qualities in the other person had that helped you do that. And maybe remember when you were really there for someone else. How did that feel inside of you? And take some time to feel that now and find some words that actually capture that quality. When we're able to give this kind of attention to ourselves, we call this being in a state of presence. Acknowledging is the simplest thing you can do to help you come into presence with something. Although it might not seem like much to simply notice something and acknowledge that it is there, it is a surprisingly powerful thing to do. It validates your inner experiencing without evaluating it. It brings you into relationship with it. So let's work with 3 sentences that give you an experience of moving into presence, and take some time to say each of these groups of 3 sentences. Close your eyes, say them slowly, and take time after each one to notice how it feels in your body. So I'll read them out for you guys. I feel so frustrated by what they did. Something in me feels so frustrated by what they did. I'm sensing something in me that feels so frustrated by what they did. And let's try the other one. There's a knot in my stomach. There's something in my stomach that feels like a knot. I'm sensing something in my stomach that feels like a knot. And notice the differences between the 3 statements. Notice if there was an increasing sense of space and ease as you said each sentence. For myself, I'm someone who really struggles with words when paying attention to my body. And so I like to go in, feel, and just be, but I don't like to tell anybody how I'm feeling. And so when I started doing this and start putting words to it, it was like, whoa, like that was hard. Big reaction to that. So in general, the first couple steps of in a relationship focusing is when you sense something, just saying, I am sensing something. I am sensing a knot. I am sensing tightness. I am aware of weight. And so I'm acknowledging, and then describe what you're aware of. And the second step is to say something in me. So when you notice that you're saying, I am or I feel tired, you can say something in me is tired. Something in me feels like it's heavy. Part of me is annoyed. And so when you put the 2 steps together, it's I am sensing, I'm aware, noticing, acknowledging that something in me is feeling heavy, angry, anxious. And so I'm going to invite you guys to a little practice of our app. So same thing as before. I'm going to invite you guys to take some time, find a comfortable spot, and take your time to let awareness come into your body. Sensing your whole body in the room around you. Sensing the contact of your body on what you're sitting on. Being aware of your breathing. Letting it deepen if it wants to. And letting your awareness come inward. Into the inner area of your body. Your throat, chest, stomach, belly. Just taking some time to arrive deeper within yourself. And remembering something that bothers you. Inviting the whole feel of that to come into your awareness. And waiting. And when you're aware of something, I'm going to invite you to maybe say it to yourself. There's something in me that feels, and fill in the blank. And you're going to continue to say this to yourself. I'm finding the best way to describe it. And you can obviously say it out loud to yourself, it doesn't matter. I'm checking the description with my body. I'm acknowledging to it that I know it's there. I'm saying hello to it. Sensing how it would like me to be with it. I'm sensing if it's okay to just be with this. I'm sitting with it with interested curiosity. I'm letting it know it can be as it is, for as long as it needs to be. And sensing how it feels from its point of view. And sensing if it has an emotional quality or if it has its own emotion. I'm letting it know I hear it. I'm open to any more it wants to let me know. I'm welcoming new aspects. I'm keeping an open mind about what they mean. I'm sensing if something needs to happen before I stop. I'm sensing if something has changed in my body or about my issue. I'm letting it know I'm willing to be back to this focusing place. And I'm thanking my body and my body's process. I'm just noticing how that was for you. What did you notice? How was it different than the somatic experiencing practice we did earlier? Was it easier, harder? I find these different techniques are just different entrances to the body, so different people will resonate with different things.
There are a couple of comments, Yoshi, in the chat that were from a bit earlier, just before the practice, when you were going through the language, when you read out the sentence. So one person mentioned that it felt like a sense of distancing. And another said it's like being an observer of your feelings.
And that's the goal. The goal of all this is to separate from that so that you are not your feeling. You're separate from your feeling. The feeling, as we go into internal payment system, is a part of you. and it helps, what's that word? Demystify, pathologize. It helps depathologize a lot of things. And actually, I'm curious, as you felt that distance, for whoever wrote that, what was that like to feel that distance? And you don't have to answer now. You can also go to other comments, and then if that answer comes later, we can read it.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye open for it. There are a couple of others in the meantime. Someone has said, I'm sensing that something in me is exhausted with my lifestyle right now.
Yep.
I'm sure a lot of people relate to that one. Another comment that this exercise was more difficult for me. I felt that I was distancing.
So I would call that, like, if you're distancing, that I would interpret that as it was more difficult because there was more of a connection to an emotion that was scary. So we need to distance to protect ourselves from that emotion.
Okay. Yeah, and a question, wouldn't that create a disconnect?
Yes, if there's another part that takes over to disconnect from that, but we also need to disconnect if something's too much. So if you put your hand on the fire, you need to disconnect because it's too much. It's not till the fire is less, but then, or that you wear a glove or something, that then we can stick our hand in. So yes, we need to create a disconnect, sort of like when we're putting things in the box, and we need to come back when we have the tools and resources to do so.
Okay. Yeah, becoming skillful at that. The distance closer. Yeah, and one other comment, it helped me release emotion, tears flowed.
Awesome.
Oh, another one has come in. Oh, there's some more here, two more. I think this exercise helps you safely explore the possible triggers of the emotion.
Yeah. That's the goal of it. That's one of the biggest intentions of it.
Okay, and a final question. Should I focus on the emotions I'm feeling rather than on the rough situation that caused the emotions?
Yes. By focusing on the emotion, it can give it, you can find out what your, how your needs were not met. If you focus too much on the event itself, then you end up looking at the person as bad, and they're coping, like whatever they did and whatever the situation is happening, that's someone coping with their shit. And because they're coping, they're going to be attacking you, and they're not going to be seeing you as someone. And you need to protect yourselves, and you need to take care of you. So if you notice, if you pay attention to the arrow, that, like, that's not going to do anything. The arrow already hit you. So let's clean the wound, sit with the wound, protect from that, let them figure out their stuff. And let's process the injury that was created in us so that we can come back with compassion, hopefully, towards someone that is injured, and be able to hold their space so that their arrows don't hurt us as much, so we can grow from it. So if you steal my teddy bear, it's not going to hurt as much, because now I understand that it's because you had a teddy bear that's the same as mine, and you lost it when you were 5, and now as an adult you really need it. So I can understand that a bit more.
Okay, so one more question. Are we exploring how to put on our own hockey equipment for the personal and team games at play?
I didn't understand. Are we learning how to put on our hockey equipment for the personal and team?
Yeah, like for the own personal experience, and feel free to, if for the person who wrote it, if you want to elaborate, but Yeah, so I'll read it again, just see if we could
Mhm.
work with it. Are we exploring how to put on our own personal hockey equipment for the personal and team game at play? So is it, I read that as, are we looking to take care of ourselves, but also the relational piece, right?
Yes. If I'm protecting myself, I can't take care of the relationship because I'm defending myself. So when I work with couples, if I'm in a partnership, the partnership is I'm there for you, you're there for me, and we're working together towards something. If my relationship is breaking down, that's because you weren't there for me. If you weren't there for me, I have to protect myself. If I'm protecting myself, I'm attacking you. And so if just by definition, if we have new houses and there's no fences, but then a neighbor puts a fence in, we don't go like, oh yeah, they put the fence in because they have kids and they want to protect their dog and because they're putting on a pool. We don't think that. What we think is like, how dare they? Don't they trust us? Why would they do that to me? Like now the neighborhood's feeling different because they're protecting themselves. Like that's where we go, right? They defended themselves and it was received as an attack. That's just, I put up a shield. You can't see me. So by working on myself, now I don't have to put up that fence to protect the pool because I know that we're in relationship and we're going to be safe.
Yeah. Yeah. So the original commentary, Yoshi has just responded saying, yes, you got the metaphor. Equipment needs and styles have evolved for current settings.
Awesome.
Yeah. So one last comment or question, really. Are we leading to boundaries?
Yes, after we go into IFS. So first I'm doing the 3 IFS and then we're going to do boundaries and then burnout towards the end. So internal family systems is also fairly new, developed by Richard Schwartz. Couple books, No Bad Parts and Internal Family Systems Therapy. The No Bad Part ones I really like. Out of all the books, that one was my favorite. It gives the most tools. I read it, but people have done the audiobook of it, and it has a few meditations in there that apparently are really nice because they're being, I guess it's Richard who spoke the audiobook. So I've heard really good things about the audiobook versus the reading aspect of it. So IFS works from the multiplicity of the mind paradigm, the idea that we each contain many different subpersonalities. So all of us have ongoing complex relationship with many different voices, thought patterns, and emotions inside ourselves. And that's a manifestation of parts that are similar to relationships we have with other people. So when we're able to turn down the volume of the different voices by transforming them into less extreme roles, we experience more authentic joy, peace, and connectedness. So that's a way of saying when we ask that part that's been criticizing to take a step back so that we can listen to what's going on inside of me, then I can access more. So IFS, and I apologize for the wordy. This slide is an example of my anxiety. So I apologize for this. So IFS provides an alternative, non-pathologizing view of psychological distress as seen through the lens of multiplicity. So many psychiatric symptoms and diagnoses are manifestations of acute or chronic of the way a person's subpersonalities have organized to help them survive. So basically what they're saying is that like many of the diagnoses that we get on a general basis, they're really coping mechanisms that have helped us survive. We just have labeled them and put a lot of bad labels towards them. So try on for a second the idea that your thoughts and emotions emanate from discrete personalities inside of you. What fears arise as you consider that possibility? People often have fears that come from the association to conditions like schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, or from the creepy ideas that autonomous entities exist within us, that we're not fully in control of ourselves. If you can put aside those fears for a second, Consider what might be good about having parts. What would it be like if you knew with confidence that your most repulsive or disdainful thoughts or feelings were coming from little parts of yourself rather than being the essence of your identity? How would it feel to disclose shameful feelings to others if you could say, part of me feels, rather than I feel? What if you totally trusted that those parts were different from your true self and that you, as the self, could help them to transform? I'm going to let you guys sit with this for a second. I'm running out of water and I'm going to send a quick text message to see if I can get another water bottle in. And so the premise of IFS is that all parts want something positive for us, and they will use a variety of strategies to gain influence within the internal system. We often use parts language, but we don't delve deep into the context of the parts. So an example, a part of me wants to go out tonight, but another part of me wants to curl up in bed. A part of me wants junk food tonight, and another part of me wants healthy food. Part of me wants to leave my partner, and another part of me cannot imagine my life without them. So you might have seen that with people who want to leave someone and they just keep going back and forth, and you're like, A part of me wishes my patient would die already because of how much stress they cause, and another part of me is repulsed by that thought. And so think of different scenarios you're in and how controversial your thoughts may be. And instead of thinking of how crazy you must be for having such extreme thoughts, let's explore each part. And so let's just meet our parts. There's a part of me that, another part of me that. So think about something controversial that you're going through, that you have completely different thoughts. And what does each part want for you? Because there's usually a purpose. So took the example of a patient dying. And for some people, it's a partner dying or a parent dying that's gone through a chronic illness. And so there's a part that says like, oh, just I want it done already. And so the part of me that wants that person to die is because I want more time. The part of me that doesn't want this person to die is because I love them. Or leaving a partner, the part of me that wants to leave the partner is because of freedom, because less arguing. Whereas a part of me that wants to stay is the fear of being alone and not succeeding. It's important to meet our parts from a place of presence, from a place of self. And the self is that part of us that is not a part. You know you're in the self when you hold calmness, curiosity, compassion, confidence, courage, clarity, connectedness, and creativity. So just notice what you're learning. And I've made this really fast because it's like this one feels way more complicated, and it has elements of what we've already done, which is paying attention, noticing. If there's criticism, we ask the criticism to take a step back. Or we're asking, well, what do you want for me? Like, what's the purpose? How are you protecting me? And we're also trying to figure out how they got created, how they, like many of these parts got created from an injury, often through childhood. And then the different parts have different relationships. So there might be a part that's the injury, and then there's other parts that protect the injury. The part that's the injury because they don't want us to feel it. And there's other parts that get activated when the injury gets touched, and then does things to make sure that we go nowhere near it. Yeah, questions about that?
There's a comment, Yoshi. Yes, can relate to this patient dying example with a family member in my situation who I do not like. How do you cope with the different parts wanting different things?
So in essence, all parts want the same thing for you, which is they want you safer. They want you, they want to protect you somehow. The way they go about it is different, and that's why it looks like they're wanting different things. It's important to fully listen to each one. So when paying attention to two parts that are polarizing, so that they're like, they look like they want opposites, right? I don't want them to die, I want them to live. Like, well, you can't have both. You set aside one and you fully listen to, like, you use the IRF example and you just fully listen to that one for it to tell you what it wants. Once you do that, you put this one aside and then you listen to this one. And then you notice what happens when you have fully listened to both of them. Usually what happens is that the ones that we're repulsed by, like usually I want them to die, we go like, no way, there's no way I'm vocalizing it. I'm going to shut that one down. We're never listening. We're never hearing it. And no one's ever going to know that deep down inside there was a part of me that wanted that. Because there's no way I'm going to admit to that. Thank you. Thank you. Did that answer the question?
I believe so.
Okay. So why am I showing you all this? Like all these different techniques and what y'all work in a very stressful environment. Many people go like, as a psychotherapist, they're like, oh, you get to hear everybody's stories, how stressful, but you guys actually get to live it, right? Like from what I understand, you're working with people who are dying. And in order to do that, you have to do an amazing job at surviving the stressors. And you're working in an institution that places unrealistic demands on you. And the strings in your heart get tugged so much that I imagine you often disregard what you want and need to make sure that other people's needs are met. And so we can't change something that we are not aware of. And my intention is to introduce to you the 3 different approaches to gaining access to your nervous system so you can start listening to it. So in my practice, I interweave the 3 and kind of go more towards one or the other, depending on what resonates with the person in front of me. And so just notice what approach resonated the most with you. And this presentation is just an introduction. There's so much to all of this. Just the somatic experiencing training on its own, it's 36 days. It's like over 3 years and a bunch of practices. And so there's a lot of experiential aspect of it. Like the actual content is little compared to the actual experiential aspect. So if you want to get the most out of today, I invite you to practice one or all of the exercises we did today, at least once a day. So my favorite time of day is when I'm waking up or when I'm going to bed. I find that it's nice and quiet for me to tune into my body and to notice the sensations in my body. Sit with them, say hi to them, and to notice my different parts that may be showing up that day. I like taking a few minutes while in bed to tune in, but as long as you do it like for 30 seconds, it's enough. The key is frequency and practice. The more you practice tuning into your body, the easier it'll be to do it on an everyday basis. So like an example that I was giving you guys earlier, that there's a couple points in the presentation where I was like about to dissociate, but I was able to catch it in the moment, use my coping mechanisms to come back. Without our awareness, our bodies react from the trauma stored in our bodies. So it's sort of like when we get angry or afraid for no reason. And so we also react from the parts within ourselves who are protecting us from something. Have you ever been in a situation when you say, why did I do that? I know this person pissed me off, but like, really? Did I have to do that? So by practicing just those 30 seconds a minute on your own when you're waking up or falling asleep, you can start creating a path between your conscious awareness and the unconscious. It's similar to when animals create a path in the forest. The first time a path is traveled, it's filled with bush and debris, but over time, the path most traveled becomes clear, and that's the one that everybody now takes. If you find that there's nothing to pay attention to in your body, and maybe because there's too much noise in there and it's hard to sift through the sensation. So similar to when like you've been in an environment where everybody's been talking, or like a busy mall or busy something. And so you're like, yeah, it's just normal noise, right? But then you go outside and it's quiet and you're like, whoa, there's a difference. So it's not that you're not hearing anything, it just, or that there's nothing there. It just might mean that there's too many things that are too loud. Or it could be because there's a sensation that's just so familiar that you're not labeling it as a sensation. If you find that paying attention to your body is too stimulating, I invite you to pay attention to it a little bit at a time. So there's no need to focus on everything at once. It's as if I ask you to eat all the food you eat in 1 year, like all the food you eat right now, all in 1 day, like, the food you eat in a year, imagine all of that, you have to eat it in 1 day. Well, you can't, it's too much, it doesn't fit. You have to do it in 3 meals a day for a year. You have to space it out. And so if you find this is nice and can reattune, but find that change isn't happening fast enough, just be patient. Our bodies can only change and heal so much of it at a time. So it's as if I asked you to do the splits by tomorrow, and you're like, all right, we're going to do the splits. You have to do them in a week. Well, no, you're not going to be able to. You're going to end up hurt because our bodies need time to change and process the change. Okay, questions, comments. So now we're going to get into boundaries.
Yeah, there were a couple of comments in the chat box here, she just about, stress in general. For every minute that we are stressed, we lose 60 seconds of serenity. Stress makes us weak.
Stress makes us weak?
Well, I think it was feel weak is what I imagined, like it makes us. So, but if Jennifer,
actually, I'd like to go back to for every minute of stress, we lose 60 seconds. Yeah. Can we change that for like every time there's a minute of stress, I need to listen to what the stress is telling me.
Okay.
Because if I'm losing something else, it's like, no, like that means that but that sentence criticizes stress. And if we criticize stress, we're not listening to it. So if you have 60 seconds of stress, it means there's something out there that's dangerous for you. So stress is anxiety. Anxiety is an emotion that tells you that danger is coming. So anxiety is telling you there's danger in the future. Anger tells you there's danger right now. You need to protect yourself. And sadness tells you that there was danger, something got taken from you. So for every minute of each emotion that you have, what is it telling you that you need to address? So if you have 60 seconds of stress, what's the threat? I'm sorry, what was the other one?
Yeah, great question. Someone commented that they appreciated you saying that it takes a long time to learn these techniques because they were experiencing some frustration and feeling lost, thinking that they were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
These are big concepts, right? They take a long time to really have to spend time.
I have some clients I have spent 5 years trying to get them to do this. Yeah. And then eventually I get 30 seconds of it. I'm like, okay, 30 seconds, we're able to go in and out, and that's all that we could handle.
Yeah, so here's another comment. Focusing on my own needs is always more difficult than focusing on others' needs.
Mhm.
I have more energy and motivation for helping my patients.
Yeah, everybody else is more important than me. So there's something in me that says everybody else is more important. And I had to learn that because as a kid, I probably had to survive to make sure that somebody else was more important. My parents were more important. Their emotions were more important than me. Because if they survive, they help me survive. So I have to make sure that that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of comments, so I know we don't have a ton of time, so I'll go quickly. We need to learn self-forgiveness. It's okay to contemplate odd thoughts. So yeah, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, super important.
Mm.
Yeah, someone else shared, I never have time or energy for me. And a final quick question, what is the quickest way to de-stress in the moment?
Notice, say hi. There's something in me that's stressed right now. And I see it. And right now, I can't pay attention to you, but I will when this is over.
Thanks, Yoshi.
Mhm. So, what is a boundary? So, it's the place where I end and something else begins. And so, what happens when our boundaries get crossed? It's a violation of our nervous system. The crossing of the boundary can be small or large. Nevertheless, it leaves a residue. What are some forms of boundaries for you? And what does a cross boundary look like or feel like? It can often feel like you're walking around and without skin or raw. So it's in very crash terms, it's a rape. Every time you cross your own boundaries, you're raping yourself because you're not respecting that line. Or I guess a nicer term would be violating. And so it's important to know when it is, because those lines can be so intangible, right? Like I'm working an extra 12-hour shift. Is this crossing my boundary or is it not? And so I have a little experiment for you, just to notice what a boundary feels like in your body. So someone you don't know asks you for money. They say they will give it back, but you don't know them, so you can't assume you won't see the money ever again. Pay attention to the sensations in your body as we play around with how much money you're being asked for. And so I'm going to ask you to pay attention to which ones you said yes to and felt happy to help. When did your body start to say like, this doesn't feel like, oh yeah, no problem. I have like, doesn't matter. Notice when your body said no. Notice when your body said absolutely no. And also notice how it starts telling you no. So as this person comes around and say, hey, can I borrow a quarter? Notice how you feel. Like, would you give it to them? Would you not? Can you afford it? Like, probably a quarter. You're like, oh yeah, whatever. I won't even notice it. And notice how that feels in your body. Now this person comes around and says, hey, can I borrow 50 cents? Does it feel like the same as when they ask for a quarter? What's it like to be asked to give 50 cents that you may never see back? Now, how about $1? This person says, can I borrow $1? What does that feel like? Can I borrow $2? You're never seeing those $2 back, but you're gonna have them. Can I borrow $5? You can afford $5, right? Like that's nothing to you. Just think, I need them. It would really help me out right now. What are you feeling with those $5? Person comes around and says, hey, can I have $10? Can I borrow $10? Is your body feeling the same as it did with a quarter? Hey, can I borrow $20? Likely never seeing this $20 again. How much is it costing you now to give $20? What's your body telling you? What's it feeling? Hey, can I have $50? Where do your thoughts start to go? Hey, can I borrow $100? Notice what comes out. Does it still feel the same as the 25 cents? Hey, can I borrow $500? I really need them. I know you have them, so can I have them? Can you afford to give $500? And what is it costing you? Just the last one for this exercise. Can I have $1,000? You have them, right? Like I can borrow them? I need them right now. Please, can I have them? I really need them. Please. Notice what happens inside of you. There's a sensation that come up. And notice if you can afford to give $1,000 versus notice what it's costing you to give. What I can afford is the money I have. What it's costing me is what I'm not going to be able to have. Because if I give you $1,000, I might not be able to go on my trip. So what did you notice? And how familiar are these? And then think of work and demands are being placed on you. How similar are the sensations of your no to the sensations you're experiencing when there are demands placed on you? Was it at the $500, the $1,000, at the $20? How much energy is required of you when your boundaries have been crossed? And put the dollar amount, just to translate, because there's no dollar amount, right? Like, and that's what makes it hard in this field, that it's not a dollar amount that you're giving, it's an emotional. So my intention with this exercise is to give it a dollar amount. And so this is just, yeah, an example. So is the energy that gets asked, was it at the 500 level, at the $20 level, at the $50 level? So how much energy is required of you when your boundaries have been crossed? And how much energy is required of you when your body says no, but your institution says you have to?
Yeah, there's a comment, Yoshi, someone has said that it brought up emotions around being asked to take extra shifts at work.
Yeah. What is burnout? Basically, when there's no energy left to use, and you repeatedly have the boundaries crossed over and over again, physically, emotionally, financially. And so basically, you're spending more than you can afford. And so at some point, there's nothing left to give. Our bodies have a limited energy. And we have a bunch of responsibilities like work, family, extended family, chores, exercise, fun, free time. The numbers, by the way, are random. I just need to add it to 100. So don't, and I didn't know how to, anyways. And so your circle of things where your energy goes to might be very different than this one. I tried to make it as generic as possible, but there's, and like we have 24 hours in a day and we sleep 5 to 10 hours depending on who we are. And then the rest, there's energy spent in different activities, different responsibilities that we have. And so that's kind of our baseline. But then what if we add a few stressors like conflict, loss, attacks from coworkers, from bosses, works, friends, partners, or the opposite, isolation, where like there's no one around, like I'm feeling so lonely, extra work, not sleeping because I'm worried about something. What if I have a cold? What if a patient died? Took a bunch of extra shifts. I had a fight at home. All that takes energy. So they start getting piled up into here. So something has to give. Right? So what do we do when we have so much on our plate? So when we have a tray of food and it keeps falling, what are our options? So we can get stronger, so we can carry more. But we all have our max, right? Like if we go to the gym, there's only so much we can, like, even the strongest like power lifters get to a max where they can't go further. We can take things off the tray and take more trips. So that's titration, meaning we do things a little bit at a time. Or we get someone else to help with the load. We give the loads, like we offload. But before we do any of that, we need to be aware that our tray is full. If I don't know my tray is full, I'm just going to go walk out and it's going to fall. So today is, let's notice how full our tray is. Where are you at in the energy level? If you compare the exercise we did of lending 25 cents to $1,000 and that feeling where you started to say like, like it's something feels, like, I don't know. On your everyday life, where are you in that? And I know this is not the answer you want, because I think the answer that many of you want is, how can I get stronger and have unlimited energy so I can give everything I can and I never have to say no to anyone? And I can put unlimited things on my tray, so I can like make this like ginormous tray that can fit like a cookie that fits like or like those giant pizzas that they put on the Guinness World Record and stuff. So to summarize, let's pay attention to how our bodies are doing through SEFSRF or something else that you connect to. So create awareness of your triggers and resources and start healing some of them. Notice at what point do your boundaries start to get crossed? At what point do we start losing items off the tray? So that's when we start like, I was supposed to do all this list and I keep forgetting all these things. So I'm a bit absent-minded sometimes. And I used to not be absent-minded. That means there's too much on your tray. Whose help can we enlist to help us out? What things do I need to let go of? How can I get stronger? So not feeling is not an answer. That's one I get very often. Like, how do I get stronger? Like, oh, if I just don't feel the anxiety, then I'll be stronger. Like, no. How do I get stronger is I heal the anxiety. I acknowledge it so that it has a space to be heard, and then it lessens. It has less of a grip on me, and I heal the injury from which that part got created. What things am I doing to cope or numb the pain? Do I like to avoid everything? Do I like to use substances or disappear into exercise or work or something. And if I'm doing those things, then that means I'm not paying attention to the pain. What things am I doing that give me energy? And we need to be regulated to regulate the people around us. So if I'm not protecting myself, then you don't have to protect yourself, and we can both. But if I'm protecting myself and my nervous system's in hyper arousal, then the people around me are going to be like, you're in fight or flight. That means I need to be in fight or flight because your body's saying there's something dangerous. So my body needs to go into fight or flight because there's something dangerous. So let's look around to find that danger. But if your body's saying we're in calm and safe, then, oh, okay, we're in calm and safe. Thank you. Questions, comments, feedback? And when you look at what you wrote down at the start of our time together, was your question answered? So this now, I invite you to ask the question now, if I didn't answer it through the presentation.
Yoshi, so there's something that I, in my work with healthcare providers often comes up, and it's here in the chat box, the words to use, right? The words to say no when you feel like, you're a carer and you feel responsible and don't want to disappoint anyone.
Who are we talking to? Patient or other staff or up above bosses?
I'm sure it comes up in every imaginable, context. So maybe we could start with colleagues, coworkers. Yeah.
So in general, the formula is I hear you, I see your needs, and I really want to, and I don't have the capacity.
Lovely.
So with colleagues, it's like, you want me to take your shift? Oh my God, I get it. You really want to go to that wedding. And if I take your shift, that means you can go to your wedding or to somebody else's wedding. And it would be really important for you to do. And right now, I really wish I could. I just can't. I'm really sorry. I hope you can find someone else to find your shift, to take your shift.
Excellent.
So similar with patients and bosses. The problem with bosses is that even when we say no, they sometimes have the authority to say, well, who cares? You're still gonna do it. So that boundary gets crossed. And so then you have to cope with your boundary being crossed. And that's sad. That's a loss, right? So there's gonna be sadness because there's a loss of autonomy, there's a loss of power, there's a loss of having a boundary. What's the point of having a boundary if no one respects it? So unfortunately, a lot of it is systemic, and how do we work with systemic is a little bit at a time.
Yeah. Another question, Yoshi. So how do you get rid of the residue that can happen after a boundary is violated? That yucky feeling.
We acknowledge it. There's something in me that got violated right now, and it's feeling raw, and it's really hurting, and I feel the hole and the pain that I'm going into, and it's taking me back to that other time somewhere in my childhood that I don't even remember what it was, but it feels similar, and I can see that part of me and how hurt it is, and I see it, and I care for it, and I give it a hug, and I'm also going to look for that hug from someone that I love and care so that they can give that. It's like, you don't get rid of it, you heal it. So like what's the purpose of a hug? Like ultimately, in essence, like you're touching someone else and that's it. But when we are sad and we receive this nice compassionate hug from someone, we go from being like this or like to this. It just like it allows our body to soften, and that softening helps us come into safety. And so it's creating that transition from danger to safety and creating that path that even when I'm in danger, I can go back into safety.
Okay. How to get better at doing these exercises? Start small. I think I most need to be able to regulate my nervous system when I'm physically at work.
I personally really like start small. I like the IRF. There's something in me that feels anxious. There's something in me that feels tight, and I see it. I'm saying hello to it. And that's it. Do that one time in the morning, like whenever you remember, really, like as often as you can. And eventually you, in some of these books, or if you take, then you'll find more. I can also send the little IRF meditation thing. If you just do it, it starts to create that path.
Thanks, Yoshi. So I think, yes, there's some thank yous. Yeah. Those are all the questions for now.
Oh. So I hope that whoever said understand themselves better, this helped. And also to diffuse stress, that I was able to answer those questions.
Yeah, lots of thank yous coming. Very helpful information.